Hello and welcome to the 1996 British Enduro Championships. I'm Frank Morgan and I shall be trying to cover as much of the action as possible again this year. We're hoping for some good coverage because I've now got the latest in video cameras, and I've also spent a lot of money on new umbrellas and also Wellington boots. The first event is the Breckland Enduro, which takes place early in March. There have been some major changes to the series this year. We do have 5 two-day events, but also 3 one-day Enduros which are also included. These will be the Havron, the Melville and the Black Prince. That's 8 rounds in total, and all the points count this year. In previous seasons, a rider was able to drop his poorer score, but that no longer applies. The points awarded basically the same as other years: 20 to the winner, 17 for second, 15 third, 13 for fourth place, and that applies to each day. But in the two-day events, every rider that finishes the 2 days gets a bonus of 5 points. I've just done a quick calculation, and I think it means that if a rider wins every day throughout the series, then he scores a maximum of 285 points. So on with the Breckland Enduro, the event sponsored by RC Edmondson Ford Group and Q8 Petroleum Lubricants, and of course the event staged by the DIS MCC, and it takes place in the Thetford Forest. So who should we look out for in the championship class? Well, number 22 is Paul Edmondson, and he's planning to ride all of the British Championship rounds this year. Eddie is riding the new Gas 250. He wants the British Championship and the World Championship too, but he's got to beat our reigning champion, and that's Rob Sartin. Eddie Smith is the reigning 125cc champion. He's also a contender for the title, finishing runner-up to Sartin last year. Eddie rides an E.T. James Suzuki. It is all very much the same. The course weaves in and out to the trees. The bumps and berms get worse as time goes on. The tight checks are timed so accurately that only the best of the riders in all the classes manage to go clean. Number 14 is Neil Boker on a TM125. The Irishman Paul Maguire on the Yamaha, followed by number 26 Jason Fraser on the KTM. It's quite a race through the tight checks, and some riders go in much quicker than others. Carl Tiley, number 23 on the TM, he was going to make sure that he wouldn't lose time. Most of the riders were going clean, but number 24, Geraint Jones, did struggle a little. At one time, he was alongside his teammate, Paul Maguire, and they were on separate minutes. Julian Oakes was putting on quite a performance. With several riders going clean, the first day results would be sorted out on test times. Quite a lot of work had been done on this test since last year. It seemed to flow better this time, and the riders were going round a good 10 or 15 seconds quicker than 12 months ago. Chris Walton, number 2 on the Husky 610, was having a good ride in the 4-stroke class. Carl Tiley wasn't really liking this test. He finished 8th on laps 1 and 2. But on the third test, he moved up into 3rd place. It was very close between Carl and Wyn Hughes. Wyn now riding a Husky 250. At the end of the day, Wyn beat Carl by just 0.4 of a second. Rob Meek put in some very fast times. He won the last test, but finished down in 7th place because he'd made a mistake with his time card. Sartin's last test of the day was very slow, and he had to settle for 3rd place overall. Eddie Smith didn't put a foot wrong all day, and he finished 4th on all 3 special tests, so that gave him the runner-up position. And the winner of this first day of the Breckland, Paul Edmondson, he won the first 2 tests fairly comfortably and then was second on the third. A good entry with the expert classes. Some riders had been promoted since last year. These were Ewan Knight, Matt Lewis, Stephen Murphy, Stuart Bridges and Steve Griffiths. They have all gone up into the championship class. Mark Vaughan, riding number 51 this weekend, had decided to stay down, although he'd won the 125cc class last year.
67.
There are some good riders on the 125s, Jonty Edmonds, Andrew Edwards. The Kawasaki rider, Chris Bumford. Number 102 is Colin Selwood. He finished 4th in the 250s. Only 11 of the experts managed to go clean. Number 66, Andrew Edwards, was one of those, and he finished 3rd in the 125s. Vaughan also went clean on his gas and beat Andrew by just over 2 seconds. Colin Selwood, riding a KTM 360, he put in some very fast test times to take the runner-up position on day 1. But the Premier Award on the first day goes to Jonty Edmonds. With over 150 clubman riders here at the Breckland, it was going to be difficult to predict a winner. But with most of them losing time on the go-in, for those riders who went clean, it was down to test times. Number 191, Ian Mundell, he finished 3rd in the 250 series last year. And the Honda rider, Graham Muir, he looked to be on good form. The clubman class seemed to be dominated by the 250cc riders. Warren Slevin, number 174, he finished 5th overall. Cy Higgins from Tavistock finished 4th. He beat Warren by just over 4 seconds. Justin Britton finished 3rd. The Kawasaki rider, Gavin Hunt, took the runner-up position. And the Premier Award on this first day goes to number 192, Graham Muir. He was averaging about 500 seconds on the test, and that meant that he beat Gavin Hunt by just over 1 second. The local man, Darren Crouch from Ipswich, won the first day in the 125s, but was down the field quite a bit on day 2. The top 125cc rider this weekend was Mike Noy from Germany, and he finished in 12th place overall. All the riders above Mike were on 250s. Suzuki rider John McNeil had a good ride on Sunday, moving up 2 places and finishing 6th overall. Justin Britton finished comfortably in 4th place, and he scored 33 points. Warren Slevin, number 174, he beat Justin on the second day and finished 3rd overall. Cy Higgins, we saw him at the end of last year riding his first championship round. That was at the Beacons. This weekend he was to finish in the runner-up position. And the top clubman rider here at the Breckland, Graham Muir from Livingstone, he wins both days in the 250cc class.
192.
I suppose Graham was one of the favourites because he was runner-up here 12 months ago in the 250s. In the expert class, the best 250cc rider was Paul Houston from Whitby, and he finished 5th overall. Mark Vaughan was out of the medals on day 2. He had a mechanical problem on one of his special tests. Rowan Jones, number 59, having his first ride as an expert, he finished 4th in the 125s on day 2. Andrew Edwards finished 3rd on both days in his class, and he scored 35 points. Keith Isaac, riding a Husky 125, he certainly set the pace on Sunday morning, winning the first test. He won the 125cc class on Sunday and finished 3rd overall. Keith scored 36 points for the weekend, and although he beat Jonty Edmonds on the Sunday, Jonty came out better, scoring 42, and he was to finish runner-up in the expert class. On this second day, Jonty was averaging about 4:88 on the test, and that was the time which Colin Selwood had put in on his first lap. On his second test, Colin knocked a full 10 seconds off that first time, and that was enough to give him the second day win, and of course the Premier Award in the expert class. It was fairly close between him and Jonty, just over 8 seconds in Colin's favour. In the 4-stroke class, the winner on both days was Kurt Pringle from Kenley. He was riding a Hasselberg 500. The second day for the championship riders was not quite so demanding, but the times on the tight checks were set so that about 9 of the class lost time. For those riders going clean, the final positions were to be sorted out on the special test, which was ridden only twice today. A.D. Smith's first test was a bit slow, but second time round he made up a good 15 seconds. A.D. was to win the 125cc class comfortably, and on the weekend he finished 4th overall. Carl Tiley managed to beat Smithy on this second day by 2 seconds. Carl had scored 29 points for the weekend. A.D. had gone well on the Saturday and his score was 33. Rob Meek had decided not to ride on the B schedule today. That was his mistake yesterday. He really liked this test and had beaten Edmondson yesterday afternoon, and then he won the first test here this morning. Rob finished runner-up on this second day and 3rd overall for the weekend. Rob Sartin's slow test yesterday afternoon had cost him valuable points. He finished 3rd on the day. He made no mistakes on this Sunday, but was 5 seconds adrift of Rob Meek. Meek should have scored 39 points for the weekend, but with his time card error he was down to 31. Rob Sartin finished on 35 points. Paul Edmondson had a comfortable lead after the first day, over 47 seconds. Eddie was clean on the going, so it was down to test times, and he wanted to win the second day as well. Meek had won the first test by 0.3 of a second. Yesterday, Eddie had won 2 out of the 3 tests, but Meek had beaten him on the last one. Eddie pulled out all the stops on this last test and managed to beat Meek by 4 seconds. So Paul wins the Breckland title. Was he pleased?
I'm glad to be back racing in British Championships, especially like the first round of the disc, because it's my favourite event, and I enjoy riding here, even though it does get a little boring, but I still enjoy it.
That don't get boring around here, we just ain't got the hills.
Congratulations to Paul Edmondson. He scores maximum points, and if he wants to see some hills, he'll have to come to round 2. That's the Isca Enduro, which is held in Wales. The Isca takes place on the 4th and 5th of May. It's organised by the Carlion and District Motorsports Club, and the event is held in the Breckford Forest. This event last year was a bit of a disaster for the reigning British champion Rob Sartin, riding number 2 today. 12 months ago his bike failed to start on the first day, and that cost him 60 penalty points. No problems today. The weather here in Wales had been fine for several weeks, so the going wasn't going to be too difficult. There were 1 or 2 muddy patches, and the local man, Calvin Williams, number 23, didn't want to get his feet dirty. Richard Hay on the Husky, Jason Fraser on the KTM. Another KTM rider, Stuart Bridges from Sevenoaks, having his first season in the championship class. Wyn Hughes on the Husky, he scored 28 points at the Breckland. No real tight checks here at the Isca, so the first day results would be sorted out on the long cross-country test. That was Rob Sartin going over the jump on the special test. There goes Edmondson. Matt Lewis coming through. Eddie Smith. Carl Tiley. Was that Tim Lewis? Rob Meek. The next one, Richard Hay. Paul McMinn. Wyn Hughes had a good day and finished 5th overall. Chris Walton won the 4-stroke class. He also beat Wyn by 1 second to take 4th place overall. Carl Tiley finished 3rd on the day and 3rd in the 250s. Paul Eddy won the first test of the day, beating Rob Sartin by just over 1 second. Eddy was much slower on the second test, and Sartin had a 4-second lead when they went into the third. Paul couldn't beat Rob on that test, so he had to settle for 2nd place. So the reigning British champion Rob Sartin was to score maximum points on the first day at the Isca. Well done, Rob. In the expert class, again it was down to test times, and Mark Vaughan, number 70, finished 5th overall. Rowan Jones was 1.5 seconds down on Mark to take 6th place. Neil Williams from Brecon finished 7th and won the 250 class. Gary Flowers, number 50, he won the 125s and beat Johnny Little at number 49 by about half a second. Number 66, Trevor Jones from Watford, he finished runner-up on the day. He'd had a very good ride. And the top expert rider, and by quite a big margin, was number 32, Colin Selwood. Jonty Edmonds was not riding this weekend. He was recovering from a leg injury. In the clubman class, most of the riders were going clean, so again the final positions down to test times. Once again, the class dominated by the 250cc riders. They took the first 11 places. The Suzuki rider Derek Gerrard from Landrindad, followed by Dylan Hughes on the Yamaha. 104 is Cy Higgins. Carl Woodman bailed out early in the morning. It wasn't a good day for him. Ted Johns was riding in the over 40s, and of course he qualified for the over 60s. Stuart James, number 107, was the top 125cc rider, and he finished 13th overall. Jared Wilcox won the open class. Andy Elliott finished in 5th place. George Brent from Croydon beat Andy by 3 seconds to take 4th. Ian Mundell, number 99, averaged just over 8 minutes 10 seconds on the test, and that was good enough to give him the runner-up position. And the winner on this first day, Cy Higgins from Tavistock, he'd got a lead of about 8 seconds. Dave Cholwell, number 125, could have won this day. On the first test, he was the only rider to go around in under 8 minutes, but his second test was very slow, and he had to settle for 3rd place. On day 2, the course more or less in the reverse direction, with 1 or 2 extra bits. No really tight checks, so again the positions down to the special test. Mark Buckley on the Husserberg 500 won this second day in the 4-stroke class, but the best 4-stroke rider on the weekend was Gary Makepeace. Dougal Walker from Broxburn, the reigning over 40s champion, he won both days here at the ISCA. For some reason, Dougal failed to get to the Breckland. Gavin Hunt moved up a couple of places on this second day, and he was to finish 4th overall. The best 125cc rider was Greg Pascoe, number 175. He was riding a Kawasaki. Andrew Knapman from Abergavenny was another rider who went much better on the Sunday, and he finished 5th overall. Ian Mundell scored 37 points this weekend, and he was runner-up in the class. At the end of the event, Dave Cholwell was 13 seconds down on Mundell, and Dave finished 3rd overall. But he too scored 37 points. And the Premier Award in this clubman class goes to Cy Higgins from Tavistock. He wins by nearly 50 seconds. Cy won 3 out of the 4 tests this weekend. These very dry conditions at the Isker meant that most of the expert class would be going clean. No one was complaining about the weather though. In the four-stroke class, Kurt Pringle scored maximum points at the Breckland, and he did the same here at the Isker. Leo Cordingley won the 250s on Sunday and finished 7th overall. Robert Rayford scored 31 points in the 125s and finished 5th overall. Number 45, Rob Smith from Usk, was 8 seconds down on Rayford. Rob finished 6th overall and he was the best 250cc rider. Ex-Clubman rider Rowan Jones finished in 4th place. Yamaha rider Johnny Little, number 49, finished 3rd, and on both days he was runner-up in the 125s. Number 70, Mark Vaughan, seemed to be avoiding the cameraman. He was the best 125cc rider on Sunday and finished runner-up over the weekend. And the clear winner in this expert class was the KTM rider from Braunton, Colin Selwood. Although Colin won the event by over 60 seconds, he had a very slow final test on Sunday. That twisted back mudguard said it all. Quite a relaxed atmosphere with some of our championship riders on the Sunday morning. Some leg pulling going on.
Well, a bit quicker today, please.
Trying, Frank.
It's no good picking my brains like this, tell you. It's got to be fair on all the other riders.
Aye. We don't want no favourites.
By God, we'll have to do some picking, eh?
Come on, Roland.
Give Frank
Everyone was looking out for the overnight leader, Rob Sartin. Could he beat Edmondson on this second day? Unfortunately for Rob, he threw it all away with a time card error. He clocked in 10 minutes early. That error cost Sartin 20 points in the championship table. On test times, he would have finished runner-up. Geraint also came out in sympathy with Rob. Well, he'd also made a mistake with his time card. Can anyone recommend a good enduro school for those two? Another rider out of luck on Sunday was Wyn Hughes. On his first 2 tests, he was averaging 6:46. Another lap like that would have put him in the top 3, but something went wrong with the bike. The suspension broke and it meant that Wyn was to finish in 7th place overall. The best open class rider was Julian Oakes from Saltash. He scored maximum points on both days. Eddie Smith was the best 125cc rider, although on Saturday he'd been beaten by Tim Lewis. Eddie was down in 6th place overall, ought to have done better, but his last test on Sunday was rather slow. One place above Eddie was Rob Meek. Rob was going much better on this second day and he scored 29 points in total. In 4th place was Ewan Knight from the Isle of Man riding a Suzuki 250. This is Knight's first season in the championship class, and like Rob Meek, he also scored 29 points. Chris Walton won the 4-stroke class on both days. He was so consistent on this special test that he took 3rd place overall. Walton's championship points for this weekend totaled 33. With Rob Sartin out of the running on this second day, there was now a good chance for Carl Tiley to move up at least one place. Carl was averaging about 6:34 on the test, and at the end of the day he was 40 odd seconds up on Walton. Everyone stood well clear when he went over the jump. He had a close encounter with a Christmas tree. Carl finished runner-up at the ISCA and scored 37 points. Paul Edmondson had been beaten twice on the test yesterday, but it wasn't going to happen today. He won all 3 tests fairly comfortably and beat Tiley by just over 60 seconds on the weekend. So Eddie wins the ISCA, but not with maximum points. His total is 42. Round 3 is the Havron Enduro, which takes place on the 9th of June. This is the first of the one-day events, and there are mixed feelings. Some people are wondering if one day will be enough for the top championship riders. Geraint Jones is one of the organisers. He should know what's required. To get in a good day, the first riders start at 1 minute past 8, and they should be finishing about 5 o'clock. It's not quite so long for the clubman class. They'll be going for nearly 6 hours. Most of the event takes place in the Havron forest. There are 4 checks per lap, and 2 of these checks are tight from the word go. The clubmen do 2 full laps of the course. That's about 92 miles, and they'll be timed on both laps of the special test. The go-in is quite testing in places, particularly on the tight checks. Some of the ruts are quite deep, and if possible it's a good idea to avoid them. This is a good spot to sort out some of the clubman riders. It comes early in the lap and it's on the first tight check. Number 155, Andy Burton, wasn't too sure which way he was going. Arthur Johnson decides to push his TM. Andy had got bike problems, and that was about as far as he was going to get. He could now sit back and watch the others. Ali Hick may not have been used to the early start. Mike Rapley was riding today. This was his first championship round. Byron Davis was in quite an aggressive mood. 2 RAF riders from Ipswich. They needed quite a lot of airspace. The special test, the start and one of the refueling areas was on farmland belonging to Geraint Jones and his family. And to get from the forest to the test, it was a pleasant ride across the Welsh hills. This part of the course wasn't one of the tight checks. They were in the Havron forest, but it was quite demanding here. There's plenty of mud and water and narrow little tracks. 120 clubman riders started this event, and just over half of them managed to finish. The tough going meant that a lot of riders would be losing time, and in the clubman class only 6 managed to go clean. This Kawasaki rider was enjoying the day. He managed to give us a wave. Then he signalled he'd got 2 more laps to do. The special test was only a few yards from the start area, so it was ideally situated for the spectators. Gary Makepeace had got rid of his back mudguard. It was certainly going to help because he won the open 4-stroke class. His test times weren't that important because he'd lost 8 minutes on the go-in. Paul Mail won the 350 4-stroke class. He won both tests, even though he fell off on one. Paul was the top 4-stroke rider because he dropped only 3 minutes on the go-in. Mike Rapley had a good day and finished runner-up in the over 40s class. Rappers lost 2 minutes on the go-in, and that was the same as Dougal Walker. It was down to test times, and Dougal was the faster man, beating Mike by 28 seconds. In the 125cc class, 3 riders managed to go clean. Kenny Evans was one of those, and he took the runner-up position. Terry Cooper, number 137, also went clean and finished 3rd in the 125s. And the top man in the class, Greg Pascoe from Colville, riding a Kawasaki 125. Greg very much at home on this special test. He beat Kenny by 18 seconds and finished 4th overall in the clubman class. Number 93, Dave Chalwell, was one of 3 riders who went clean in the 250s. Dave had to settle for 3rd place though because of a slow first test. The other 2 riders who went clean along with Dave were number 92, Ian Mundell, and of course Cy Higgins, who was number 91. Ian beat Dave Chalwell on both tests and finished about 20 seconds ahead. Cy Higgins was the man they just couldn't beat. He won 3 out of the 4 tests at the ISCA, and this weekend he won both tests here. Cy finished 36 seconds up on Ian Mundell and took the Premier Award in the clubman class. For the expert riders, a long, tough day, 123 miles, and most of them would be going for nearly 8 hours. Some would be riding for even longer. This was quite different to the ISCA Enduro, where nearly all the class went clean. Today it was going to be the reverse. Hopi had a good ride to finish 6th in the 125s, but he lost 6 minutes on the go-in. Andrew Edwards lost the same time as Hopi, but was just a bit quicker on the test to finish 5th. Johnny Little lost 5 minutes to finish 4th. Tony Altas won the 4-stroke class. There were only 2 finishers, him and Gary Grover. Colin Selwood had a disappointing day, a bit of a problem with the bike. Well, it did get shaken up a little. Colin only managed 1 lap before he retired. Trevor Jones lost 5 minutes on the go-in, put in a couple of good test times and finished runner-up in the open class. The winner in this class, number 57, Murray Thompson, surprisingly he lost 4 minutes on the go-in. On test times alone, Murray wouldn't have beaten Trevor Jones. This go-in was just what Murray liked, but somehow he couldn't stay clean. Neil Williams from Brecon won the 250cc class comfortably, although he dropped 4 minutes. In the 125s, if anyone was going to clean the Havering Forest, then it should have been Rowan Jones, but he dropped a minute on the going. 2 riders managed to go clean in this expert class, so Rowan's 60 seconds penalty meant that he was going to finish in 3rd place. On the special test, Rowan did the fastest first lap, and then he was 2nd on laps 2 and 3. If he hadn't dropped a minute on the go-in, he should have won the event. So Rowan finishes 3rd in the 125s and 3rd overall. Mark Vaughan from Knighton was one of the 2 expert riders to go clean. Vaughan needed the points this weekend because he'd had a disappointing ride at the Breckland. The other expert clean on the go-in, Jonty Edmonds, and he needed the points too because he'd missed the ISCA altogether.
39.
So for these 2 riders, the final position sorted out on the special test. Mark averaged 2:78. That wasn't quite as quick as Jonty, so Vaughan had to settle for the runner-up position. After the first test, Jonty was 4 seconds down on Rowan Jones. He then went on to win the next 2, but on test times alone, Jonty would have finished runner-up to Rowan. There was only 0.2 of a second in it, though. Jonty clean on the go-in, so he wins the Havering Enduro and scores 20 points. The championship class in for a very long day, starting at 1 minute past 8, hoping to finish before 5 o'clock, 162 miles in total. Some of them must be used to this early start, but I think Carl Tiley was cutting it a bit fine. When the riders entered the Havering Forest, this was the sign they saw. As the day went on, it was going to come true. 2 tight checks per lap for the championship class, and they were doing 4 laps throughout the day. Carl Tiley, number 3. Chris Walton on the big Husky, and just behind him, A.D. Smith. The riders had been seeded for this event, so of course Paul Edmondson, number 1. Julian Oakes on the KTM, finding the going slippery, and Ewan Knight. The second Suzuki rider, Chris Kosh. Wyn Hughes, number 7, on home ground today, so ought to go well. He's followed by number 8, Tim Lewis. And the Yamaha rider just behind him, Paul Maguire. Stuart Bridges and Derek Little trying different lines. Geraint, the last number in the championship class, up until a day or 2 ago, he wasn't sure whether to ride or not. There's so much to organise here. On these tight checks, Paul Edmondson seemed to have everything under control. Matt Lewis on the Husky 125. 23 is Paul McMinn on the 4-stroke. And the third rider, Neil Boker, on a TM. Some of the going on the second tight check was so tough that even Edmondson was down to a walking pace. Tiley, who was number 2, I'll get it right this time, he was just ahead of Rob Sartin. On lap 1, the time for this check, 30 minutes, most of them would go clean, but on lap 4 it was down to 22. Wyn Hughes would like this sort of going. A.D. Smith well up on time, but he wasn't feeling at his best this weekend. Just over a week ago he'd had a big crash at a motocross meeting. Fortunately, he hadn't broken anything, but suffering now with a few bruises. Julian Oakes in quite a determined mood. Adrian Nixon riding number 13, not a lucky number for him. He had a couple of punctures during the day. He lost a lot of time, but did finish. Geraint might have been the last number in the championship class, but he was making up time on these tight checks. Edmondson was flowing well on lap 2. The times were getting tighter, but he was almost certain to go clean. Tiley was trying to hang on to Eddie. Walton also going well. Smithy hanging on too, but it was going to be a long day for him.
It's 12:44.
Some of the riders would be struggling on this second lap, and there were 2 more to come. Number 15, Richard Hay.
Gate.
After this tight check, the riders went on to the start area and the special test. Edmondson won the first test on 2:46. He also won the second, about half a second quicker then. This was the last we would see of Paul, because a little later in the day he had a problem with the bike and had to retire. Now the Havron was wide open. Rob Sartin was the next man to Edmondson on the test. Rob was averaging about 2:49 on the first couple of tests. Tiley was next to Sartin, but averaging 2:57. Back on the going, the times were getting much tighter. Sartin seemed to be well up. Tiley started the day on the same minute as Sartin, but he was struggling to keep up with him now. And he'd got Wyn Hughes not far behind. Tim Lewis was having a great ride until the last tight check, when the bike overheated and he had to retire. He was in front of A.D. Smith at this time. A.D. was going to win the 1-2-5s, but it had been a long day for him and he lost 12 minutes on the going. Geraint was keeping well up on time. Richard Hay finished the day 9 minutes down, but in 6th place overall. On the last tight check, Sartin was the first man through. Then it was Wyn Hughes. He'd got in front of Tiley. Carl was now struggling. He was going to finish the day 3 minutes down and 4th overall. Chris Walton, the top 4-stroke rider, 8 minutes adrift and in 5th place overall. And who was coming behind him? It was Geraint. He was clean through the Havron forest. The other two riders to make it were Wyn Hughes and Rob Sartin, so it was all down to test times. Coming into the last test, Wyn Hughes was about 3 seconds up on Geraint. The third test of the day had been quite a slow one for all of the championship riders because it had rained. On this last test, the course had dried out and they were going quicker. Wyn's last test of the day was just under 270 seconds. Geraint had to go quicker than about 267 if he was going to beat Wyn. These three riders who were clean on the going knew the Havron Forest fairly well. It was home ground for Geraint and Wyn, and Rob Sartin had spent quite a lot of time here just over 12 months ago. This test, however, was new to everyone. It had not been ridden before today. Geraint knew he had to go on this one. His best time was 2:63. That was close. What a hair-raising test for Geraint, but he'd done just enough and managed to beat Wyn Hughes by 2.5 seconds. Rob Sartin also clean on the going, and after 3 tests he was about 23 seconds up on Geraint. Rob, of course, needed maximum points today after that bit of a disaster at the Isker. On the second day, he scored only 5 points for finishing. Rob was averaging about 2:57 on this test. He was second to Edmondson on the first 2, and he won the third test. This last one was a bit of a formality with 20-odd seconds in hand. Rob also won this last test of the day and finished with maximum points from the Havron. This first one-day British Championship round had really been a challenge, and it had sorted out the best of the riders in all the classes. Quite a few riders had problems with this special test. Some found difficulty crossing the finishing line. There was a bit of pushing and shoving. It was on the tough going though, where people really came to grief. The Havron was a real enduro, only one day as we know, but for many riders they needed another day to recover, and for some it was even longer.